Hello, I'm Dean Takahashi. I'm the editorial director at GamesBeat, and we're here with another GB Live recording session. This one's entitled Gamescom LATAM Inside the LATAM Gaming Market. And I'm happy to be here with Luis from Wildlife Studios and Alessandro from Xsolla. So welcome. And I guess my first question is really about why are we talking about Latin America now? What's happening in the market? What's your overview for why the growth is happening here?
Okay, well, I'll introduce myself first. My name is Alessandro. I've been working with Xsolla for almost 5 years now. I'm a former indie developer from the region, so it's interesting what you are looking into the podcast, and we will discuss about that later.
I'm going to introduce myself as well. So I'm Luis Piccini. I'm the director of studio partnerships and publishing at Wildlife, and also a game director. I did a few games at Wildlife, Tennis Clash, Sky Warriors. I've been in games for almost 10 years now. And thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Now, tell us about your views of the Latin American market and also how they have changed over time, I guess. Right?
Okay, well, I'm pretty excited on what we are living right now in Latin America because we are kind of like making waves. I talk with the guys, and there are not many big studios in the region like Wildlife. I think that everybody looks up to Wildlife because it's kind of the giant player in the region. So something that has been shaping up in the last few years is developers moving a little bit from outsourcing, because like the greatest games in the world are handcrafted in Latin America, like all those AAA titles that you see in the market. But now there is a little shift towards learning more about the business side of things, partnering up with business partners, and learning the ropes of what the business of video games is. This is, I think, what is changing in the region overall. And best example is Wildlife.
Yeah, if I can complement a bit that, I think that Wildlife is one of the, I think it's the biggest mobile game company in Latin, and we've been around since 2011. And we've seen that over these years, the market has been changing a lot. So there's one thing that we have exchange rate advantage that developers from Latin America can get their revenue in US dollars and get a good amount of money, the equivalent in our currency. So that's why outsourcing is one of the main things that developers in Latin America started doing. They started working on specific parts of other games and learning, and then some studios started popping up, and then some of them failed, some of them succeeded. Now we have like the second or third generation of those, and people that worked on big studios and came back to Latin America to make games. So I think that we are in a quite good moment for the making of games in Latin America. And at the same time, the consumers in Latin America are in a good spot because, especially, I'm gonna say Brazil and Argentina, but all of the countries in Latin America like games, have been playing games a lot, but in the more specific areas. For example, Counter-Strike is pretty big in the region. And now it's starting to diversify and get like people that are playing different stuff and that are spending more money in games and seeing this as a valid form of entertainment to spend money on.
So when you're talking about that evolution, it feels like moving up the food chain of the game industry, right? And I guess sort of towards the top, the more ambitious side of things is really establishing your own brands, your own intellectual properties that you own, and then things that say bring in Latin American culture or Brazilian culture into the content that gets played both locally but also globally, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I think that you nailed it there, Dean, because this is what I've been talking with. We do from Xsolla a lot of work with all the different developer associations from the region, and we pretty much work with almost all of them in different countries, from Mexico to Argentina. Just in Brazil, we have 20 associations of game developers, and there is this entrepreneurship style of doing things here locally. But I think that we are trying to step up our game, and like you said, moving up that chain, because we always been in the opening doors where is the outsourcing part. So I think that we are getting better and trying to get there. And from a consumer perspective, also, like, one of the things that happen very often is that the local player community doesn't really know that there are studios such as Wildlife or other big guys in the region with their games. They don't really know that those are from the region and made in the region. So I think that there's something that we are not doing as developers as well.
Yeah, I think something that's very common to happen, it happened like last week when I introduced myself to someone that's not in the industry. Oh, you work with games, that's cool, what did you make? And I say like some of the games of Wildlife, and they say, oh, wait, I played that. Is that from a Brazilian company? Like, people don't even know that they are playing something by a Latin American developer. And of course, I get pretty proud when someone played my game, especially if they like it, if they say it's good. But at the same time, it's like, oh, how did they didn't know that? They didn't even think that that might be a Brazilian or a Latin American company doing that. And as I said, it's like moving up in the food chain. So we started with people doing basically freelancing, outsourcing, co-development, studios. Now some of the big studios are trying to move up and start publishing or do UA financing or even bigger operations. And when you do that, you get more leeway to tell your own story. So I think one thing that we see a lot, especially in indie studios, is we have this rich experience of Latin America and fantastic realism like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, those things that we like talking about, we like using in our stories, which is great. I love when people do that. But the first version of that was a naive, oh, I just want to do art. I just want to tell my story. And now people are starting to see, okay, this is also a business. If no one buys this, the lights won't be on and I can't tell anything. No one will play it. So they're starting to put in and mix those. Okay, I want to make something that's good, that's aesthetically pleasant, that is artistic, but that also works as a consumer product.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And from the developer's point of view too, what's sort of key to building and scaling in Latin America? Like how do you once you've got that hit game, well, what else comes next, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk with a more mobile-focused perspective because that's what I know about. But I think the first thing, localization, and Alessandro will probably talk more about this later, but localization is not just translating strings. I'm not gonna spoil. And then you have to think about the performance. This is something that people really forget about when they come from tier 1 markets. But Latin America, same as Southeast Asia, same as other developing markets, people will have like 10-year-old phones and they want to play your game and they want to spend money in your game. But if your game's 1 FPS, they just won't. So it has to run on a potato, basically. And anything that you do in special events that target that culture. So if you do like a carnival event, Brazilians love carnival. You do that once a year and people will fall in love with your game and will respect you as a developer. And same for Cinco de Mayo or any specific things that you can like just a small nudge saying, hey, I see you. I like that you are here with us. We'll feel welcomed and it will build loyalty with your product.
Yeah, just like going to your point about localization, I always say that localization in our market is not just a language exercise and I have my game ready in Brazilian Portuguese and Spanish, but it's rather like understanding how our market works because we are more than 20 countries all across the region and we are kind of like this big melting pot of Europeans, Asians that came at some point to Americas and they brought their culture and then we shape it into our own thing. And like you said, you have Cinco de Mayo in Mexico, but then you have in Colombia other types of carnivals or other kinds of dances. And like what we do at Xsolla is like we helped with this localization from a payment perspective. It's like down here in Brazil, if you don't have Pix account, pretty much you're not going to sell your game if it's not available with that type. In Mexico, cash is still king, and what people use is OXXO, so that they go to an OXXO that is a grocery store and they top up their account. So it's not only about the languages, but there are so many other things. Like you said, devices is really important in the region as well, and learning like the culture.
We have also here in Brazil now,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
because the slogan is like how to pronounce it, because Brazilians pronounce it wrong. Just to give like two examples here, just so, Wildlife does it well, we are here, it's easier. But two other companies that I think do it really well are Garena with Free Fire, especially on the performance part, and Supercell, especially with Brawl Stars. They really nailed their Latin America skins, characters, events. Everything they do with the Latin American community is really good.
Well, Luis, let me tell you that you basically read what I was talking about in one of the reports that is coming out. And I was saying that one of the best examples is what Garena did, because they really nailed it down to say, okay, Brazilians don't have end of line mobile phones, but they do play a lot in mobile phones. So we will adapt our game to their needs, not the other way around. So if you want to like come to our market, you really need to adapt your strategies to not to the local market as Latin America, but to the countries as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would also note that GameSpeed did work on a special report on Latin America, and it's presented by Xsolla, and you can find out a lot more about the markets in Latin America from that report. But going back to one of the interesting, say, strategies that developers can have in this situation, do you see wildlife games as being global in nature by design, or are there elements where you're taking, local Brazilian culture and making it popular globally on this sort of universal stage?
So I think wildlife is global by nature, and this is like very intentional. When we started, the founders said out loud many times, we don't want to be, we are the Uber in Brazil or the big company in Brazil. We want to be the wildlife of the world. We want to shoot for the top. And I think like this was a very good strategy. This attracted a lot of talent in Brazil that wanted to do something new and different and not just copy whatever is working outside. And because of that, today, roughly, I can't speak numbers, but roughly our money comes from 1/3 US, Canada, 1/3 Western Europe, 1/3 developed Asia countries, and 10% rest of the world. So this means that Brazil is like 1-2% of our revenue, which is 1-2% of the market. So we are not overrepresented in Brazil, which is something that's some people find surprising. They say, you're in Brazil, you know what they want, and you don't have like too much of an oversized presence there. And that's because we were always thinking globally. What we do bring from Brazil is we have a unique perspective that's even like hard to disentangle. We think as Latin Americans because we were raised this way, we studied this way. So our sports games will, of course, always have something of football in them. Or when we do like Tennis Clash, you can see there are like a lot of marketing videos that start with football and then they pick up rackets and start playing. And then the way that we think about community, the way that we think about chats, the way that we think about events, music, like with samba, it's very hard to ignore your culture. So even if you're not designing specifically for that, you always bring something of yourself to entertainment or to artistic product.
Yeah. And Alessandro, I guess the Brazilian developers are ready with their games. Like, how ready is the infrastructure of commerce and monetization to support them?
Well, I would say that for anything that you need to do in our region, you need a business partner that knows the infrastructure and can leverage their presence there. So I think that we are really well prepared in regards on how to shape your go-to-market strategy in the country, but you really need to have local partners. And I will give you this example. I was talking with some of the beautiful people that are with us with the cameras here back door, and it was hard for them to hire someone to get cameras in Brazil because they didn't have like a local partner. So they were doing it like externally. So whenever you need to have someone that has that those connections in the region, because in Latin America there is something that is true, and Luis won't allow me to lie on this one. We need to be connected. So we need that human connection of knowing people, and having that business partner is really, really crucial in the region.
Yeah, if I can expand a bit on that, Latin America in general has a lot of informality and personal connections on doing stuff, in the sense that someone that might be a very good, very important business partner or talent to hire may not even have LinkedIn or may not even speak English. In Brazil, I think it's 6% of people speak English only. And it's impossible that only 6% of people in Brazil are worth talking to. There's a lot of people there that could help you and don't speak English or are not on LinkedIn or Twitter or any usual things that you use to connect to people. So if you have someone that's a partner that can put you in contact with those people, it makes things way easier.
Nice. So there's a broader opportunity here too for global studios to come here and get more out of the Latin American market too. Like from that point of view, like what does the region have to offer?
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine that he works in games, and his name is Joaquin from Uruguay, and he has a phrase that I love. He is helping some international studios and publishers with their distribution locally, and he always said, "You are leaving money on the table. If you don't know how to get it, I'm going to help you out." And I think that's that opportunity here, that there is a gap, because sometimes people think we are an emerging market, right? We are not like the US or Europe, which are like top tier in terms of economy. But there is an unattended market that if you really nail what they want and what they're doing, they will pay for it. Because we have, and this goes for AAA, from AAA titles to indie games. There might be some indies in Europe that their game could do well in the region, but since they don't understand and they don't have a local partner, it's hard for them to enter the market.
I think if you look at the data, Latin America, and in particular Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico are the ones on top of my head, are really overrepresented in downloads. And any studio that's watching this, I invite you to see your own data. You probably see that you have a lot of Latin America players, probably not a lot of Latin America revenue. Part of this is because of a gap in income that's expected, but even when you account for the difference in purchasing power, it's still lower than you would expect. So there is a gap there. The people have the interest and they are not playing as much or not spending as much as they could, probably because you are not.
There might be a barrier there, because if, like we were talking about Garena and their game, and they do a lot of money in the region, because they do understand and they have local partners and so on. So I think it's kind of like how you see the region from a more local perspective rather than just a region, a whole region by itself.
Yeah. And having come to Gamescom LATAM maybe 3 times now for myself, I mean, it's easy to notice that there's just the more enthusiastic gaming culture here with all of the cosplayers and the creators who are very active in this region and very good advocates for games, right? And I imagine that this is a big part of getting the most out of the market as well. That game companies need to come here and interact with them.
Yeah, and you got a point there. Is for example, Brazil. You guys have like a lot of influencers here, and it happens that these influencers are also popular in Portugal. So the influencers from Brazil are more popular in Portugal than influencers from Portugal. And the same goes with Spanish. We have like in El Salvador, I'm from El Salvador, like very tiny country in the Americas. And we have a guy that, here, his name is Fernán Flo. He's a very famous guy. He's the top Spanish influencer in the world, and he's very popular in Spain. And so if you are trying to target countries like Portugal, Spain, Italy, it makes sense to have influencers from our region. And that's something that people don't really see it until they're not here.
It's funny because the younger kids in Portugal are starting to talk in Brazilian accent, and the older generations hate it.
Yeah,
and that's exactly because of that. And yeah,
And the same goes with the Spain.
Yeah.
With Spain, it's kind of like similar.
So I think on the topic of influencers, a lot of them are gamers. A lot of them are already playing games, and you're going to see that most of Brazilians and most of Latin America in general, they will consume content in their native language. Again, because not everyone speaks English. So the bigger streamers in esports, if you get like top 5 list for any esport, there always going to be at least one Brazilian. I'm not going to cite names here, but one of the biggest in the world is Brazilian because he speaks in a very, very specific Brazilian coded way that when he tried translating and speaking in English, most foreigners that watched it hated it because it's a very different way of broadcasting. Like he just talks during the game. He doesn't narrate the game. Americans hate this. And like this is the same if you go for soccer. The biggest commentators on soccer, like Brazilian football, speak in a conversational way instead of narrating. And if you don't understand that people will consume this content because that's what they are used to, that's like culturally the way that they think of watching a game, you'll never be able to just create something that will entice them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, it's good to have this advantage of having enthusiastic fans. It reminds me of places like Japan and South Korea, and they've gone a long way in the game business. So it's good for Latin America. So if you're looking ahead, what are some predictions you would make about the next chapter for games in Latin America?
I think that one thing that I'm pretty excited about is that AI is moving the barrier of entry to lower for new developers. And we have like a lot of talented indie developers here that sometimes struggle with infrastructure or tech or even like with coding. And now they are making games, and they are making games that are good. They are making them faster. They are making them in a bigger volume. And on one hand, it's competition for us, but on the other hand, they see this and say, oh, look at that. A lot of people that have good ideas that want to make games and couldn't, now they can. So I'm excited to see this. And I think, of course, this will happen everywhere. But in Latin America specifically, I think that there is this gap of, I have the skills to make something, but not get quite there, that AI bridges, that's more relevant here than other places.
Yeah, and taking from there, like our creativity, and we are a melting pot. Like people from all over the world. My father was Italian, Luis was Italian as well. So we have a lot of influence from different countries, and we have that creativity and innovation. And this is something that is, I think that there is a gap right now where the industry is, you see like big titles, they are always launching kind of like a saga or the same game, and they don't take that challenge of doing something new. I think that's the opposite here in our region. We try to do something that is innovative and new. And on top of that, for the future, something that I see and I talk with the guys is that, like with all the different communities and associations that we work with, is that we are starting to see games not just as games, but also as products. And that's kind of like a mindset that we need to change, because like I would say like 10 years ago, it was more about the passion and something I want, like an artistic expression. Yep. And I think that we are all trying to move forward, like you put it correctly, trying to move up that food chain out there. So we want to be there. We want to make our great games, express ourselves, but we also want to make money.
Yeah. Everyone is trying to say, okay, how can I get there without losing what makes me me?
Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you very much. Remember to check out our special report on Latin America. Thank you to Xsolla, our sponsor here, and thank you to our speakers, Alessandro and Luis.
Thank you for the invitation.